So, hi everybody, welcome to week 5 of HTML. We're moving along pretty quick in this class. I think we're about halfway through or maybe even almost done.
Wow.
So, today we're going to talk a little bit about, remember how we learned about the box model a couple weeks ago and we learned how to kind of like place things on the page? Have you ever had a problem like putting a picture exactly where you want it?
Oh yeah, I couldn't put the images of my dog in a straight line. It's so frustrating.
Were they all like in separate parts of the
Yeah.
page? Yeah. It's really hard, huh, to like make everything the way you want it on the page. But lucky for you, we're going to learn a little bit about how to put stuff on the page where you want it. But first we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up. So we have a couple of true or false questions up here. So true or false, IDs are used for individual elements and classes are used for many different elements. What do you guys think?
True.
True. And why do you say that?
Last week you were talking about IDs are unique.
That's right. So this one is true. How about this one? In CSS, classes are selected with a hashtag.
True.
True? Are you sure?
Yeah,
we
true.
used hashtag before.
We did use hashtag, but remember we used hashtag to select IDs. Do you guys remember what we used to select a class?
Oh. Some symbol.
Tags.
Not
Slash.
quite. I'll give you a hint. There's one at the end of the sentence.
Period.
Yeah, you use a period. So let's fix this up. So that's false. Select them with a period.
Oh.
So good work on the warm-up today. Now we're going to go over to our lesson for today. Okay. So remember at the beginning of class how we talked about how some people had a little bit of a problem putting their pictures exactly where they wanted them? Like, I remember somebody was saying that she wanted to put stuff in a row, but they would all be on top of each other instead. So today, we're going to learn about positioning, and positioning will help you put stuff on your page exactly where you want it to be. So we're going to play around with where this apple goes. Remember this apple? We put it on like 3-4 weeks ago, and hasn't done much since, so we're going to give it some attention today. So to change positioning, you do the position attribute. So position. And there's 4 different kinds of positioning that we're going to learn about today. The first one is static. So if you do position static, then the thing you're trying to position will just stay where the code tells it to be. So it'll just be in the default spot. So because we said static positioning, this apple is just going to be where it has been for the past few weeks. But we can do other stuff. We can say that the position is absolute. So absolute positioning, we'll place it relative to the earliest parent element that also uses absolute positioning. But
What does that mean?
So basically, like if we put this picture inside of a div and that div used absolute positioning, then this apple would be moved relative to that div. Does anybody know what relative means?
What is div?
Div, remember div from a couple weeks ago?
Div is a box.
Mm-hmm.
That was such a dumb question.
Gian, that's not very nice. Say sorry to Michael.
Fine, I'm sorry.
Okay. Please don't be rude to your classmates. Remember, we went over this at the beginning. Respect, right? Everybody respects each other inside the classroom. So, where was I? The div, right? So because if this apple was inside of a div, and that div had absolute positioning, then an apple would be moving around relative to that div. But because it's not inside a div, it just moves around relative to the actual page. So if we change its top element or attribute by, let's say top is 50 pixels, the apple disappeared. Where did it go? Let's go look for it. Our apple, see, is 50 pixels from the top of the page. And if we want to change how far it is from the side of the page, we can say maybe 50 pixels from the side too. And see, now it's 50 pixels up and 50 pixels left.
So the image moves 50 pixels away from left and top.
Yeah, so you can think of it as how much space there is on the left. So it has 50 pixels of space on the left side and 50 pixels of space on the top side. So now let's see what happens if we go to the third kind of positioning. The third kind of positioning is relative, where it moves away from the default spot. So
What's default?
default is where, remember how when we put it into the code, it just sat in that same spot for the last few weeks? So that spot where it sat is the default spot. It's basically where the code will tell it to go if you don't say anything else. So let's scroll down and look for our apple. Maybe it's back where it's supposed to be. I see. So remember how last week it was right under that link to the Apple page? It was right here, right? But because we still have this top and left thing, instead of being right there where it's supposed to be, it's 50 pixels down from where it was and 50 pixels to the right. So that's what happens when you do relative positioning. It moves away from where it originally was. And then there's one more that we can go over, and that's fixed positioning. So fixed positioning is where it's positioned relative to your browser window. So does anybody know what the browser window is?
No.
Oh, it's like a computer screen.
Yeah, so this whole thing is a browser window, and that's basically what you use to view the page. Now see when I move this bar up and down, the apple moves with it? That's because the code is telling this apple, no matter how big the page is, you need to have 50 pixels of space from the top of the page and 50 pixels of space from the left. So even if I scroll through this page,
Whoa.
see how it's just staying in the same place? So that's fixed positioning. So if you want something to float always like at one side, then you can use fixed positioning to do that. But you can also, instead of using top and left, you can use bottom and right if you want to put something on the other side. So let's say bottom is 50 pixels and right is 50 pixels. Now it's moved over to the other side, and no matter how big I make this page, it's always going to stay right there, by the bottom right.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so now you can use this to put all your stuff in order and put your pictures next to each other or away from each other, however you want. So I'm going to hand out a worksheet that says a little bit more about how to do this, and you can practice on your own.
Sweet.
Ooh.